Hello, everyone. Welcome to Saturday's edition of Weekend Waypoints, presentation of SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, here to take you through Friday's action around the SEC. And whoo boy, was it a day around the SEC on Friday. We're going to also get you ready for Saturday's games in the conference. Before we get to any of that, though, I have to remind you that this episode of Weekend Waypoints and every episode the Weekend Waypoints is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors, which is your new home for Jordan Brand. Gear up today and take flight. Make your play in the latest head-to-toe Jordan gear for the entire family. Available in-store and at academy.com. Unleash your greatness with Jordan, now at Academy. I mentioned this on the preview pod. Fun fact, to do a Jordan baseball tie-in, Randy Hood, the head coach at UNC Wilmington, played on the Birmingham Barons with Michael Jordan. So there you go. Team that was managed by Tito Francona. How about that? So anyway, let's get to Friday's action around the league. We've got a ton of comments sitting in there waiting, and I have a feeling I know which fan base most of those are going to be coming from. I have not looked yet. But since I have a feeling about that, let's go ahead and pull up the game of the day box score here because I feel like it's going to help guide our discussion. So here we go. LSU 6, Tennessee 3. Fun little 6-run ninth for LSU. That'll do. I also, frankly, like there are two games today because I also have Texas and Texas A&M on this because, I mean, that one ended first and I was like, well, that's probably the game of the day. You know, it was close and tight and, you know, there was the rivalry aspect of it and all that. And then, I don't know, like an hour later, it was clear that, okay, well, I've already taken down the notes for that. So we'll just do two. But LSU Tennessee, such a fun finish. You know, there was a lot here. It was obviously you feel a little bit. LSU fans don't. I understand that, but on a human level, you feel for Dean Curley. 2 errors in that ninth inning, all 6 of those runs unearned. So that element of it is tough. But even after the errors, like LSU was hitting lasers off Nate Snead. Like it was clear that they had a pretty good idea of what to expect from Nate Snead. Maybe Nate Snead wasn't sharp, whatever it was, like it was a laser show. So, you know, the errors, yes, they were backbreakers, but also there were a lot of opportunities to get out of that inning without a 6 spot, right? So there was that. This felt like the kind of game where Alec Box kind of helped win this game, right? Because the atmosphere, even at 1 o'clock in the morning, basically was still electric. You know, and was really felt like it willed LSU to a victory there. You know, and sometimes that energy got channeled in a kind of negative way. We had a deal where somebody in the student section threw a baseball onto the field, and like that's obviously not acceptable. But the energy was great, and it felt like the crowd there really pulled LSU across the finish line. A lot of big individual moments there. I mean, the Jared Jones home run obviously is what is going to get the most attention, rightfully so. But you know, Dalton Beck comes through, a guy who really hadn't played, especially in SEC competition, and just hits a laser of an RBI single to score a couple of runs, right? That's just, you know, it's just, and Jay will tell you like, oh, the players play it, you know, we only just kind of try to put him in positions to succeed, but just going to him in that spot, someone who's relatively unproven against that level of pitching, and then have it come through. I mean, that's what managing is, right? And so that was a clutch move there. So, and it felt like a win that LSU needed. I talked about this going into the weekend that, you know, these are two teams that probably feel like they've dropped more SEC games than they expected, or they would like to. And LSU is also coming off of a Tuesday run rule loss against Northwestern State. So, you know, it was a game that LSU, I think, feels like maybe it has a win that could be a catalyst moving forward, I guess is what I should say there. All right, let's flip over to some comments. I'll close out of that. All right. Let's see. Mark says, nervous Joe will try to rush this episode so he can finish before noon. No. Have a little faith, Mark. No, I get it. Like, I'm here on the West Coast. I mentioned that yesterday for those of you who were not, didn't see yesterday's show. Like, I'm out here covering games on the West Coast. So it is, as I'm saying this, 8:45 in the morning. So I just knew it was a pretty decent chance that, weren't, you know, that there were going to be Georgia and Oklahoma were going to have thrown a first pitch before I finish, and that's okay. So yeah, we'll we will be thorough about it, Mark. I assure you. Caleb Falk says, heck of a game last night, Joe. Pitchers duel right up to the very end. Bear came out of his mini slump just in time. Looking forward to Ianson bringing it tonight. Yeah, that's the other thing. Is that, Jared Jones had not been swinging it well, and he was, he kind of needs to be the centerpiece of the lineup if LSU is going to be as good as it can be, because there's just not as much pop in their lineup. And by the way, that's true of Tennessee too. But Jared Jones is a guy who could be a high level power bat in the SEC. He's proven that, obviously, and he just hasn't been that in SEC play. So perhaps this snaps him out of that a little bit, and gets him going. There's a couple guys like that. Stephen Milam a little bit too, scuffling a little bit in SEC play, hasn't quite been the same. So, we'll see. All right. Josh Catlett says it's got to be pretty rare to have 2 SEC games finish after midnight on the same day. I would imagine so. But the conditions of what we had last night would be the scenario under which it had happened again, or happened before and would happen again, where there's just rain across the Southeast. And so it kind of affects multiple, the same system affects multiple games. It's kind of, feel like that's how it would happen. So, but yeah, it has to be fairly rare. Joey says, Teen Buddy, your future is not at third base. And then there was a little back and forth between Mark, saying, I thought he was a shortstop. And yeah, so they played him at shortstop earlier this year. He was a shortstop coming out of high school. The consensus generally is that his pro future is, or should be anyway, at third base. Just part of it's his size. Now, you can be a big shortstop. Like, look around pro ball, there's all kinds of them, but you have to be an elite. Your defensive tools have to be elite to be a big shortstop, like that. And so he's an offense first infielder. And so, I mean, it may not look pretty at times, but he's going to get a pro ball opportunity at third base. But it was not his finest moment. And I know that Vol fans have been a little bit disappointed in his defense at times this season already. So this was just kind of like one more thing. So I totally get that from the fan perspective. All right, Todd, good to see you. Todd says, morning, Joe. What do I need to know about the Gamecocks for tomorrow, this doubleheader today, and series as a whole? What do my Batcats need to do to stay hot and win another SEC series? Go Cats. One is that you're not going to be able to just put them away. Like, South Carolina is not as talented as Kentucky or as a lot of other teams. Now, they have the best player on the field in Ethan Petrie, but the depth is not where they want it. But you're going to have to put them away. They're not going to go away on their own. I think we've seen that all season. They've had they're like the opposite of Missouri, where Missouri just hasn't been competitive most games. South Carolina has been competitive most games, and they could probably have twice as many SEC wins as they have if just a couple of things go differently. I think about the A&M series. If they close out a game in which they're on the verge of run ruling A&M, if they close out that win, they win that series. And oh, by the way, they had a chance to win the first game of that series, right? It went to extra innings. So, again, it wouldn't take miracles for their record to be basically what Kentucky's is. So they're going to be a tough customer. The thing is, you've got to work their pitchers. Brandon Stone is a sinker slider guy. His magnum opus was last week, where he threw an 86 pitch complete game in a win over Ole Miss. If he's throwing the sinker well, he's tough regardless, but you just got to find a way to work him. And he's had a lot of starts this year where it didn't go well, a lot of outings that didn't go well. Last weekend was really kind of a breakthrough for him. And so can you get Jake McCoy out of games early? Because they do have a pretty small circle of trust pitching wise at South Carolina. And that's been an issue for them. So they're swinging the bats a decent bit better now, but I think that's keeping them contained offensively is less of a concern from Kentucky's standpoint, because I just don't know that South Carolina has the lineup to really hurt you if you as a pitching staff do what you need to do. But on the flip side, they do have their frontline pitchers, whether it's Stone or McCoy, like they can give you trouble if you let them, or if you let them pitch their game, or if they're just executing really well. So the key is going to be just don't let them get deep into games. Get into the bullpens early as you can, and then I think Kentucky will be in decent shape. But again, my biggest point is that this is still a team that's playing hard despite the struggles this season. They're not really interested in rolling over for anybody. So Kentucky's going to go and have to win these games, not expect South Carolina to lose them, even if South Carolina's record suggests that they might do that. That's not necessarily the case. Sean Miller says, "Good morning, sleepyhead. Blah, blah, West Coast excuses." You're right, Sean. Look, I just need to be better. All right, scrolling. Ryan says, "I hope we get to see Doyle Anderson square off again, either in Hoover or Omaha. Two absolute studs." Yeah, that was one of the comments earlier mentioned it. I forget if it was, I don't know that I read it, but oh yeah, Caleb said it. Just like, yeah, it was a pitcher's duel until like just a weird, wild game broke out in the end there. But yeah, both were excellent. Cade Anderson had more the strikeout pitch going. Liam Doyle didn't strike out as many, but gave up one hit, had a no-hitter into the, I don't know, fourth, fifth, sixth, something like that. I forget where exactly it was, but had a no-hitter going relatively late in that game. And that's kind of what you expected from that game. I mentioned yesterday that if there's anybody, there are only a handful of pitchers in the SEC who you'd feel you've really got a chance to compete with Liam Doyle on a Friday. Cade Anderson's one, Kyson Witherspoon at Oklahoma is another, but the list is pretty short. And I think we saw yesterday that Anderson truly is one of those guys because he gave his team a chance to win in a game in which Liam Doyle was not only on the mound, but pitching well. Ben Nato says, "Time to give Curly an outfielder's glove." That could be. He's a pretty good athlete. I definitely could see that. Sean Miller, this is a joke from our main podcast, Rivalry Week. Can we all agree that was a terrible sin by Penn in the ninth? How dumb are those smart kids? I did not see that, Sean. I'll have to go back and look at that. Let's Go Sports. What a name there. Says Gators are catching fire. Yeah, another big win for the Gators, 6-4 over Arkansas. Liam Peterson was effective on the mound. That's what they need. I mentioned it yesterday of like they need to win as many Liam Peterson starts as they can because the quality after that is just not really there. Now, it has gotten better, and I'm confident it will continue to get better. That's one thing that Florida does well, among the many things they do well as a program, is I look at last year, and you can use Liam Peterson as an example. Now, he got a little bit tired at the end. His start in the Super Regional against Clemson did not go well, but basically from the midpoint of the regular season to Hoover, like Liam Peterson was a different guy than he was the first half of the regular season. And so I do wonder if we're going to see some of these freshmen, whether it's Aiden King or whoever else, or just some of the younger guys who haven't pitched as much, turn a corner as the season goes on. That would be totally unsurprising for me if that were to happen, because that's kind of what they do. But yeah, the 6-4 win over Arkansas is a big one. And for Arkansas, you're officially in your skid, I think. I think every team has one. I guess except Texas, apparently. But they are officially in that rut, and this is just going to happen, and you have to weather it. And Arkansas is talented enough and well-rounded enough and has done enough this season to prove that they can come out of it. I'm guessing they will come out of it, but they're kind of in it right now, and that's just baseball. Let's see. Let's Go Sports says, "I think the Gamecocks could take the series this weekend." Yeah, I think they could. They absolutely could. Joey says, "Feel like that was Tennessee's best chance to win this weekend unless AJ starts Sunday." Yeah, and even if AJ Russell starts, Joey, I just wonder, does he have 3 innings in him? 4 innings in a very optimistic scenario, and I think probably less. I'd take the under on that. Yeah, so I get that. Like, he does give you just to give you a quality few innings, and that's valuable. But even still, like, I think his impact will be limited just because he's not stretched out. Let's see. James Charles mentions, hopefully our offense will start to perform better. He's talking about LSU. Yeah, maybe that'll be a little bit of a coming out game because the lineup in general had been a little bit stagnant of late. LJ says the dish was rocking as well, and man, it looked like maybe only 50 Aggies fans in the stands. Way to show up, Texas. Yeah, I mean, there were definitely more than 50 fans, but yeah, the UT fans did show up well in that game. It was a great atmosphere. My colleague Mark Etheridge was there, so he's got coverage of that on the website if you've not seen it. Let's go over that box score real quick because I was going to talk about that game as well, kind of in this game of the day segment. Really well pitched game, different than Kate Anderson and Liam Doyle in that, Ruger Riojas and Ryan Prager are not going to be the dominant arms like those guys are, but you see Riojas there, 5 2/3 scoreless, and then we'll flip over here, and the same thing for Prager, but he gave up a run, 5 2/3 strong innings for him as well. So both guys set their teams up for success there. A couple of things here. One is I'll be interested to see moving forward as I flip back to Texas. They had to use Grubbs and Volantis, and that was the right move. That's not a critique, but since they did use Grubbs and Volantis, now Grubbs only threw 19 pitches, but Volantis threw 40. What do they do moving forward? I saw they had Thomas Burns warming in the 9th. I would assume he'll be out pretty quick in today's game if needed. But that's kind of what Texas was trying to avoid a little bit is using multiple relievers it really trusts in a single game this weekend while it's shorthanded and will be shorthanded every weekend moving forward. So that's a minor thing. And again, with 19 pitches, I assume Grubbs can bounce back. If not today, then perhaps tomorrow. So that's not nothing, but it is something to monitor there. And oh, by the way, Volantis, he gave up a couple hits and a walk, but all 5 of his outs recorded via strikeout, including a big one of Terrence Keel, the second in the game. Beautiful breaking ball that just dropped into the strike zone, and Keel knew it. It was one of those deals where the second it dropped into the strike zone, Terrence Keel started walking off, as he was getting punched out. So it just, it was kind of, it was just one of those pitches. He just got. A&M scored an unearned run late. This game would have been a potential shutout had it not been for a dropped pop on the infield that allowed a run to come in, and it did create like a little bit more drama late in this one because it felt a little like up to that point. And I didn't see the first 5 innings of this game. I tuned in after I got back to my hotel, but it kind of felt like a game that Texas was just going to kind of salt away here, and rather, it was going to be close because it was going to be 2-0, but it didn't feel that close. That's kind of the feeling I got as I work on something in my eye. That's kind of the feeling I got, but that unearned run, it felt like kind of like woke something up, and there was a different energy to the last couple of innings. So, but Texas is able to stare down A&M and get the win there. Another fun game. All right, I'm going to close out, so my face is going to get real big on the screen. Prepare yourselves. There we go. We survived. Okay. Tennyson Tipton says, you never want to lose to Texas, but ultimately the goal is still the same, at least steal 1 in Austin. Yeah, I think that's right. You want to, from an A&M perspective, you want to win every game, but the reality is that you shouldn't expect to go into Austin against the number 1 team in the country, no less, and win that series. You shouldn't expect that. Now, you can hope for it, and A&M could do that. Like, that's not impossible. But yes, you should really just kind of hope to get 1 and get out of there. So that's still very much on the table for A&M the next 2 days. Hotel room coffee, man. It's got caffeine in it, so it'll do the trick. But my goodness, what do we got? Jackson Coker says, how concerned are you about Arkansas? A little, but only so much. Because I think this mostly is just you played some good teams that are playing well in the moment. I mean, okay, you lost a series to Georgia at Georgia in 2 one-run games. Like, And then, hey, A&M is just playing really well right now. That's not to dismiss it, but A&M, maybe they're not playing like the number 1 team in the country like they were in the preseason, but they're playing like a top 10, top 15 team right now. So that's, that's another thing. Now, If Arkansas doesn't bounce back well in this series, we can have a different conversation, maybe going into next weekend. Because then I'd be a little more concerned, because this is a Florida team that Arkansas is flatly better than, like 100%. Now, I think they're also better than Georgia and Texas A&M when they're playing at their best. But really, on any day, I think Arkansas, yes, I mean, you get my point. I got sidetracked by a comment there, but you get my point. The comment I was sidetracked by was Sean, who makes a good point. He says Woo Pig has a very tough finish to the season. They're good, but they basically face all Omaha teams down the stretch. I'd be a little nervous. Yeah, so I think this is also where you have to separate the results and the product, right? Where with a tough finish, you're going to drop some games, but it's like, how does it happen, right? Now, yesterday, you didn't get the start you wanted. Zach Root, got hit around a little bit by Florida. That's the part that feels like that's just going to happen, right? This is the SEC. It's an offensive league. The part that I would be monitoring a little more closely moving forward is does this lineup backslide? And then how much does it backslide? Because that was really what made Arkansas a team that we all stood up and went, oh, okay, this team is different than the last few Arkansas teams. And those last few Arkansas teams were still could have easily been Omaha level teams, and they were in Omaha in 2022. So that was the game changer, was the offense. And so does the offense continue to backslide? Does it, pick itself back up and get better as we head down the stretch? That's going to be more what I'm interested in, because one-off tough starts don't really worry me too much, because that's just part of the deal in the SEC. Feels like, with rare exception, I think about that LSU sweep of Oklahoma a few weekends ago, but with rare exceptions like that, pretty much every team has at least one start on a weekend where it's just like, well, that didn't go well. And that's SEC. And Let's Go Sports makes a good point. Nobody should be concerned about Arkansas. It's just a matter of if you catch the Gators on a good or bad day. I think that's also right, because Florida's still talented, and if they're playing well, they're going to be able to play with anybody. They just haven't done that consistently, and they're hurt, of course. Brad Baker says, this is a funny comment. Some would say LSU did not deserve to win this game. I am some, but boy, am I happy. Hopefully this offense gets going. They have been very overrated. Yeah, or just, whether or not they're overrated, like, they just haven't been performing well enough, right? And so I'm with you, Brad, that I would be optimistic if I were an LSU fan that this game could kind of be a springboard offensively. Let's Go Sports also, this is kind of for you, Todd, like with the Gamecocks. If the Gamecocks pitch well, it equals a win, because recently their offense has been on fire. But if they don't, they lose. That's it. But they could have a good pitching day and bad hitting and lose. Not consistent. Yep, that's fair. Just not consistent. All right. Joe, how did Gasparino and Laviolette compare and contrast? They seem like similar players. I mean, they are in some ways. They're big center fielders. I mean, tall and kind of rangy. So there's that. Gasparino is, for my money, a better defender, just because he's got a little more of that kind of gazelle quality to him in center field. Seems a little rangier. And I should say I'm not a scout, so take this with a grain of salt. I'm just a guy who watches a bunch of baseball games. But I think Gasparino maybe has, if not now, then the potential to be a better center fielder, just because, again, he's got kind of that real long, smooth stride that can run balls down. Laviolette's a much more complete hitter. Gasparino gets really hot for stretches. He was the SEC Player of the Week a few weeks back. He's just capable of that. It's better. There's still not enough plate discipline for Gasparino. He's getting the thing about it for him too is that he's in a lineup where he's not the focal point. Now, he is a big piece in the lineup, but there are other guys that are focal points for Texas. So he, in theory, is getting more pitches to hit than others. Meanwhile, Laviolette is kind of always been the guy that, hey, you got to be really careful with him. So he's getting pitched a little more carefully. And that's part of why he has so many walks, but also he just puts together really good at bats. And so I agree with you, Mark. They are similar players in some way. Like I said, big center fielders, big power, big raw power. There's no doubt about that with Gasparino, but Laviolette gets to that power more often because he hunts better pitches. He has a better feel for his swing, better feel for the strike zone. But I think both have I think both are big leaguers, frankly. And Gasparino is going to be one of those guys. I just wonder if Gasparino is going to be one of those guys where he gets into pro ball and it really clicks for him. And he's going to be someone that we look back on and say like, wow, he's really killing it in Major League Baseball. And he just never quite put it together, in college. Had some nice moments, but never had that absolute breakout season. Now, over the final month, like he could do that, like we might be singing a different tune by the time we get to Omaha, but that's a good question, Mark. Sean says all the relievers in the Texas A&M game, Texas A&M game, I always have to like separate those, will be good to go at least one more outing, in my opinion. Yeah, probably, especially in this series, right, Sean? Like, what if you're not going to really kind of keep the accelerator down in this series, when are you going to do it in the regular season, right? Like, this is the series that you feel like you would want to do that in. Ace Man says Aggies had at least 3 flyouts travel farther than the Horns' 1 home run. That's baseball. Yeah, no, I agree. Mark says, in jest, I'm assuming. Word is Arkansas will offer Tony at the end of the season, sending DVH to Mizzou. Mizzou would be all in on that. I'm certain. Randy Peterson says, War Eagle, Dutton is a dude. Yeah, man, Auburn a 6-5 win over Mississippi State. Now, that got interesting late. Late home run by Joe Powell to tie that game 5-5. Clutch RBI double by Cooper McMurray down in the I believe it was the 7th inning. He hits that double to put Auburn back on top. But before that, Dutton was awesome. And he's quietly, we've talked about him a decent bit on this show and on Highway to Hoover. But I think beyond that, more like nationally in college baseball, he's been kind of an underrated story. Part of it is because he doesn't throw 98 and whatever else. He's not a first round pick, but he has made himself some money this season. I can tell you that much. But it's just been one of my favorite stories. A guy that was just kind of blocked at LSU. It's one of the positive transfer portal stories that we can complain about all the things we don't like about the transfer portal, and I think those critiques are fair. But this is an example of a positive one where he was never going to have the kind of like opportunity he got at Auburn. Now he could have competed for a rotation spot, and based on how he's pitching this year, maybe he would have won a rotation spot at LSU. Maybe he would have earned it. But at Auburn, there was an opportunity for him to go into the season expecting to be in the rotation and train for that and get ready for that and prepare for that in all the ways you need to prepare for that. And he is absolutely taking advantage of that opportunity. So that's huge. I think it's a cool story. And another big win for Auburn last night. Mississippi State, by the way, again, like now they're 6-13 in the league, and it's like I said yesterday, it's starting to get a little bit late. The next 2 games for Mississippi State this weekend are going to be big ones. Daniel Ordoin says, how can all 6 of LSU's runs be unearned with the homer? Let me make sure that is correct. Yeah, okay. I was just making sure that was correct. But yeah, well, it's because there was 1 out when the run started, and there were 2 errors by Dean Curley that would have been outs. So the third out had Dean Curley made those plays, the third out would have been recorded before any runs had scored. So once that second error gets made, you're essentially in a situation where everything else is going to be unearned because the inning should have been over. That's kind of how they get there. Yeah, okay. I see that Mark explained that as well in the comments there. Let's see. I see your comment there, Brad. You're quite welcome. Thanks for your comment. Sean Miller says, closer to home for you, Joe, or at least my home for right now. Oregon beats Oregon State last night in Eugene. That's where I was last night. Great game. And they drop a spot in RPI. How broken is this home road RPI formula? Dude, I just have given up on trying to understand. Like, I understand the formula. The formula is not complicated. 50% your record, 25% your opponent's record, 25% your opponent's record, and road wins count for 1.3 wins, home wins count for 0.7 wins, neutral site counts for 1 win. Like, it's not complicated, but yeah, the movement of it doesn't make sense to me sometimes. I don't know, man. And that's a tough one for Oregon because they need to because Oregon feels like a team that could host, but then you look at their RPI and it's like, well, they're not even close. So yeah, they definitely need all the RPI points they can get. All right, let's do some hitters and pitchers of the day, and then we'll get you out of here. All right, flipping over to hitter. Now, normally, no, I don't think I hit the button right. There we go. Normally, I don't put, normally I tend to value the individual performance more so than specific moments. But in this game, I had to make Jared Jones the hitter of the day. 2 for 4 with that walk-off home run. Just the context of it, not just in that game, but also the context of he's been struggling, and LSU as an offense has been not living up to its potential. So I just think that moment was so important that overcame the fact that it was just, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes, 2 for 4. So normally I go for just the stat line, but that was just too much to ignore there. All right. Other candidates, Slade Alford, big game for Georgia in their win over Oklahoma, 10-9. Oklahoma made a real toward push at the end of that game. At one point, I believe it was 9-2 Georgia. Oklahoma scores a whole bunch of runs to get back in it. UGA is able to play a little bit of add-on with the run that becomes huge late in that game there to even that series. Rubber match today, and that game has already started 13 minutes ago as I look at this clock here in my hotel room. Oklahoma in that game, Jason Walk, 2 hits, Kyle Branch, 2 hits, Dawson Willis, 4 for 5, 2 doubles, 3 runs batted in. Really impressive athlete is Dawson Willis. If he's back at Oklahoma for another year, he's a JUCO guy. He's a junior. If he's back for his senior year next year, he's a guy that I think – now, he's also talented enough he could get drafted. But if he's back next year, he's a guy that strikes me as just with how talented he is, that he could be a guy that takes a big jump next year. Really, a tall, lean athlete, strong arm, runs. He's got raw power. The more nuanced parts of offense, though, he's still working through. For Auburn in that 6-5 win over Mississippi State, Chris Rembert, 4 for 4 with a double and a hit batter. Cooper McMurray, 2 for 4 in that go-ahead RBI double there. On the Mississippi State side, Ace Reese was 2 for 3 with a hit by pitch. Alabama with a 7-3 win over Mizzou, a little less dramatic than Thursday night's win where they kind of just survived by the skin of their teeth. Richie Bonamolo Jr. for Alabama was 3 for 5 with a stolen base. Cade Snell, 2 for 4 with a homer and a walk. A couple guys from Missouri. Chris Patterson, 2 for 4 with a double and a triple. He did the hard parts of the cycle there. Pierre Seals came off the bench in this game, then went 2 for 2 with a walk, so reached all 3 times. Ole Miss, 8-3 win over Vanderbilt, a game we haven't talked about just yet, but Ole Miss got to J.D. Thompson and got him out of the game with some runs hung on him. It was a good game for Hunter Elliott, good start for him to kind of set the tone, and a big win there for Ole Miss to kind of trend back towards trying to host here. This would be a big series win at home for them if they could win one the next couple of days. Mitchell Sanford offensively 3 for 4 with a double in that one. Talked about Texas and Texas A&M. A couple of unlikely names here on the list for them. Tommy Farmer the 4th, 2 for 3 with a home run. Ben Royo, 4 for 4 with a double. His batting average now up to something like 284. Just he hasn't played a ton, so 4 hits and his batting average goes up like 100 points. And then we talked about Jared Jones, obviously. Andrew Fisher on the Tennessee side was 2 for 4 with a double and a walk. All right, let's flip over to the pitchers here. All right, pitcher of the day is Liam Doyle, the 1 hit in 6 2/3 innings. Too much to ignore there. Lots of other good options, though. Liam Peterson, we talked about. There's Sam Dutton again. We talked about him. Riley Quick for Alabama against Mizzou, 5 2/3 strong innings. Hunter Elliott, okay, you can nitpick the 5 walks. That's not ideal, but the rest of it obviously was great. 1 run in 5 innings. Riojas and Prager, those guys were on opposite ends of each other. And then Cade Anderson, who was opposite Liam Doyle. So we had a couple really good pitching matchups in the SEC with those 2 games we talked about at length there. But Liam Doyle, the pitcher of the day for, I don't know, probably the 4th or 5th time this season. No real surprise there. Okay. Game of the day for me today is that Tennessee LSU game. Georgia Oklahoma deserves a mention too, because it is a rubber game and 2 teams that are kind of occupying a similar space in the SEC pecking order here. And so that's a big rubber game, but Tennessee LSU is interesting to me from the standpoint of how does Tennessee bounce back right? Like how does that loss linger with them? Do they let one loss turn into two losses from an emotional standpoint? That's something I'm looking for. Marcus Phillips is on the mound. Does LSU look to run more? That's obviously a combination that we've seen the last couple of weeks for Tennessee's opponents. Anthony Ianson, looking forward to seeing his performance and what he does. A lot of fun things to look forward to in this game today at Alex Box Stadium. That's my game of the day for Saturday. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this edition of Weekend Waypoints. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for all your questions, comments. That's my favorite part of this thing that we do every weekend day. I will talk to you again tomorrow morning, probably a relatively similar time, perhaps a little earlier, because I'm again here on the West Coast. So they'll lead you right up to the games, a little bit like college game day in football and basketball, leads you literally right up to the games. All right, folks, I'll talk to you tomorrow morning. Enjoy the baseball today.